we know very well that compound exercises have been celebrated, revered, whereas isolation exercises have been dismissed or ridiculed or whatever. And it's important to sort of understand how that happened and the illogic of that, right? It's become sacrilegious to say anything negative about a compound exercise. And it's become, taboo to say, hey, I do isolation exercises. Oh, well, we have to understand how that all started, right? I'll do it very briefly here. Once upon a time, before anyone understood anything about biomechanics, and before anyone understood there was a value to physique development, the only thing that mattered was exhibition of strength. In other words, the only thing that mattered was impressing people with lifting something heavy, right? So at first it might've just been, people with their buddies, I can lift this rock over my head. Can you do this? Right. Then it became circus acts. Then it became entertainment. Right. And then some of those exercises or lifts became somewhat standardized, meaning that, the things that people thought were circus acts, some of them, they thought, hey, let's do a competition. Let's do this standardized thing and compare who can do it better, right? So, for example, there was a thing called the floor press, which basically ended up becoming the bench press. And basically, they would put a barbell on the ground and they would elevate it with wooden blocks just high enough so you could slide under the bar on the floor, right? So when your elbows were on the floor, right, your hands were on the bar. You had just enough distance there, right? And then you would push it up and you bring it down. Hey, let's compare how well I do, how much I can lift with that to what you can do with that. Well, that's not a biomechanics analysis. That's not saying to yourselves, what's the best way to work your pecs? They weren't even thinking about pecs. They were just saying, look how strong I am. Are you that strong? Right? Based on how much weight is moved, right? So that's ushered in powerlifting, and powerlifting then, it was still in the early days of powerlifting, it was considered vain to seek physique development, right? It was the only thing that mattered. They equated strength with ethics, with morality. Like you were immoral if you were weak, and weak, quote unquote, meant not being able to demonstrate the moving of a lot of weight, right? So it just so happened that some of the powerlifters had the genetics that allowed them to develop good physiques. We've all seen powerlifters that look horrible in terms of physique, right? And so we know that that powerlifting doesn't make everybody's physique better, right? It just so happens if someone's got the genetics for a good physique and they were a powerlifter, they thought, hey, this is a good foundation. Let us now add what they thought were finishing, polishing, shaping exercises they called isolation exercises. But if you only did the isolation exercises, you couldn't lift much weight, which means you weren't demonstrating strength, which meant that it was for sissies or not foundational. So what ended up happening was that it was this idea that powerlifting must be done first before you do the sculpting exercises is ridiculous, because a muscle doesn't know the difference between sculpting
right,
or anything else. All it knows is my job, if I'm the muscle, if I'm the deltoid, if I'm whatever the triceps, my job is to make that elbow extend.
Yeah.
I don't know what the circumstances are. I don't know what's in your hand. I don't even know if you're using a full range of motion or not. All I know is I'm going to pull that elbow straight by pulling on the forearm. That's all I know, right? So it is ridiculous to think that an isolation exercise can somehow tell the tricep, oh, you must now somehow change or improve, whatever that means, your shape. No, the tricep is going to grow if it's challenged in whatever shape it's genetically determined to take, period.
Yeah.
Right? So you're better off doing an isolation exercise that allows you to do full range of motion, that allows you to work to capacity, to your own capacity, not another muscle's capacity, right? With a resistance curve that gives you early phase loading, alignment. You don't have any distortion of the joint going on, right? And if you strengthen all the muscles of the body one at a time, and each one of them gets stronger, the end result will be at least as good, if not better, than the person who tried to strengthen, quote unquote, all of his muscles 3 at a time or 4 at a time. There's no advantage to strengthening a muscle as a participant in a group of 4 muscles, as opposed to doing it on its own. There's no advantage to that, right? So you have to ask ourselves, like in parallel bar dips, the front deltoids will be more loaded than the triceps or the pecs. But people who do parallel bar dips aren't trying to develop their front deltoid. They're trying to develop their triceps or their pectorals. Right? The weak link in the chain and the mechanics of the exercise automatically loads the front deltoid more and overstretches it and undercontracts it. And so that means the front deltoid isn't doing as well as it could do, even though it's the most loaded. The tricep isn't doing as well as it could do with other exercises. The pectorals aren't doing as well as they could do with other exercises. So those who think, oh, well, you're saving time because you're doing 3 muscles at one time. No, you're not. You're doing a compromised version of each of those muscles. If that's enough for you, have a nice day. But if you really want what's best, you're better off doing 3 different exercises for those muscles.
Perfect.